Here we go. What's up, everybody? This is Don with Third Creative, thirdcreative.com. And in this video, we are going to take a quick tour through my newest template, HAZE Multi-Sport. This is a light and bright, nice and white, outdoor multi-sport template. And it was originally made for football, but we can also use it for other outdoor sports: soccer, baseball, softball, lacrosse, cheer, marching band. You get the idea. But I really like the white, clean look to it, and you've got some color pop in there. I think it came out really nice. I'm excited about it. As always, you're going to get two horizontal files, 2x3 and a 4x5. You're also going to get two verticals, also in a 2x3 and a 4x5 ratio. You're going to get your 1x3 panoramic, and you also get your 4x5 ratio memory mate that you see right here in the very center. And you got a lot of options with this thing. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right in. And I'm going to give you a walkthrough using the 16x24 vertical. Pretty much all the same concepts are going to apply to the other files as well. There is a little bit additional that you need to know about the memory mate. So we'll talk about that at the very end, but let's start right here. Let's turn off these top layers and just start with the background. Now this background is pretty much set up the way you need it. Everything's in red because you don't change the colors. If anything, you might come in and this layer here, field goal post, you might turn it off, or maybe you might decide that you want it bigger or smaller. But if you do a sport, if you're working on a sport other than football, you'll want to turn this off. We've got our solid color background. We've got a sky layer here. We've got our lights, which are split into two different folders for left and right. And we've got our field goal post, and then we have a upper light source. You'll see if I turn it off there at the top, just a little added dramatic effect there. But pretty much, other than this field goal post, these are all layers that you pretty much want to leave alone. This isn't a template that you would want to really play with the color of the background. It's intended to have this light white look. The next folder is where you'll do some things. We've got our upper text layer. Let's have a look at this. We can actually zoom in just a little bit. So our year is set to vertical text. You can obviously customize it and change the color using this gradient overlay. So just double click on gradient overlay and click here in the box. If you have one set up, you can use it. Otherwise, you can manually set up your colors by clicking these boxes here. Let's see, and that's pretty much how we have it set up for most of these layers. We've got our left divider bar, which you'll see it separates the year with the team name, and it's also with the gradient overlay. You can use the color overlay instead if you want it to be solid. Team name, same way, gradient overlay. We have our middle divider bar with a gradient overlay, and our sport with a gradient overlay. And because we have these divider bars here, you may have to move things around a little bit and recenter them. So if you went with a team name that's a little longer, like Bulldog with a U, obviously you can see that doesn't work. So you would want to select the middle divider bar, hold down Shift, also select Sport, click on the corner here. I'm going to hold down Shift, I'm going to drag it out, get it lined up how I want it, and now you can select all of these layers here, Sport all the way up to year, scale it down to size, get it centered. There you go. Another option, if you have a really long team name like Rough Riders Baseball, that's a lot to fit in here, and it would make it really small. So if you try that out and you just don't like the way it looks, an alternate method or option is like this. So let's just leave your team name up here nice and big. Let's take up a lot of space, and then we'll make the divider bar and the sport text layer much smaller, and just drop it down and line it up right under the right hand side here. I think that looks pretty sharp as well. So that's an option if you run into a situation where your team name's really long and it just shrinks your text down too much to fit on the canvas. Let's see, let's back up. Yeah, that's fine. And that's pretty much all your layers here. This is your stripes layer. As you can see, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. Next we have our subject image. A little bit to talk about here. We have a atmosphere behind the subject. I might have been able to just keep that in the background folder, but I've got it here in the subject folder. So your sample or your subject images will go above this layer. You can see I'll turn it off. It darkens behind them a little bit of haze, foggy atmosphere, if you will. And then you've got your subjects that will go here below these two layers. I do this a lot with my white backgrounds. It's just a little flare. There's two of them. You can duplicate them and use as many as you like, but I like to place them kind of on the shoulders. You'll see if I move it over, you can see what it looks like. It kind of looks like light is wrapping around your subject, a little extra dramatic effect that I like to use. You can place them, you can kind of see it works in a lot of places. The elbow right here, where the jersey ends, up on the shoulder pad, over here, wherever you like them, but I like them right here on the edges of the shoulder pad. And if that's something you don't want to really bother with, if you don't want to spend the time on it, you just turn them off and you're good to go. Next we have adjust levels to blend subject. This is a levels adjustment layer. Now my subject is already how I want him to look. However, let's say that you have a subject that it's a little on the dark side, maybe black jerseys, black uniform, just too dark. If you use this, you can help it blend. So you just double click on this icon here, and for those of you who are not familiar with your levels, this marker on the left controls your darks. This one in the middle is your midtones, and this one on the right is your highlights. And to lighten your subject, I always start with the midtones. And you'll see it'll have an undesirable effect on this subject here because he's not dark to begin with. But you see how I'm starting to lighten up my midtones. So it's a matter of finessing the midtones and the highlights to lighten your subject and get it to blend with the background and look good. So you can play around with that. It'll make a huge difference. If you just drop a dark image in there, it's not going to look right. It's not going to look natural. Everything's so bright in the background, and then you have, you know, real harsh, contrasty, dark subject image. So it's really worth it if you take a few extra seconds and play with that. This next adjustment layer that I have clipped, it says remove any color from uniform, and it's optional. So what I mean by that, let's turn this off. Now you notice that there's a little bit of a blue tint that's in his jersey that shows up. So when I was creating this, I'm looking at this blue tint in this jersey, and I don't like it. So I added a hue slash saturation adjustment layer. And what I did, if we double click here and turn it on, I went to blue and I turned it all the way down. I also went to cyan and turned it all the way down. If I turn it up, you can see that it kind of shows up in a few places. Cyan, not so much, but I did turn that down as well, not green. But the blues, you know, you can see big difference there. So I think that really helps my image blend with the background. And so if you're using an image and there's not blue in the uniform that you don't want to lose, or you know, if it's a really dark uniform and it's not an issue, then you don't need the layer. But it's very handy. Now the downside to that is that, let's say they have blue eyes, or maybe they have just a little bit of blue and the writing here. So if that ends up being the case, you have a layer mask here. It's already set right in this area around the face where it should be to not apply. Now you might need to change that, but my goal there was to have it not affect the area that their eyes would be in case they have blue eyes. But if you need to change this, you can always right click on the layer mask, delete the layer mask, put a new one on, and just use your black brush. So go to the brush, make sure it's on black. Anywhere you paint with that, this desaturation of the blues will not appear. And so if they have blue eyes, or if you want a certain part to show the blue, you can just paint it on. So it's just a little minor thing that I put in there that makes a big difference in my opinion. So you can use it if you want to, and if you don't need to, then you can just turn it off. Keeping it moving, lower fog. So let's zoom back out. Very sensitive here. Okay, so our lower fog is pretty self-explanatory. It's 2 layers. You have 2 layers here that you can turn on or off. You can use one or the other, none, or both. Other than that, you don't really need to bother with anything in there. And then the last one, an important one, is our lower text. It's referring to this whole area, this rip, tear, corner. And so rather than starting with the very bottom layer, I think the most important layer to focus on first is this one right here that says texture, and in parentheses it says change color here. So you'll change the color using this color overlay, and this, so all this red that you see, if you click in here, you can use your slider and change it to the color that you need. Probably all already familiar with this, but for anybody who isn't, the more to the right you go on this square, the more saturated. The more to the left, the less saturated. The higher you go, the brighter. The lower you go, the darker. So you can finesse it. Just play around with it until you get the color that you're looking for. Let's back out of that. All right, so now let's go to the very bottom. We have our small top corner tear. So I call it the small top corner tear because it's this small section right here, and it is it gets its color from a gradient overlay. So if you don't want this to be gray, you'll just click here on the gradient overlay and click in this area. Now you can select whatever gradient you want. Maybe you want purple, green, and orange. I hope not. You can set it to a custom one or something something that you already have. But that is how you change the color of that section. We'll want to leave this one alone. We have a highlight layer, so if I turn that off, you'll see the effect that it adds. Probably want to keep that. Paint stroke. So this paint stroke down here, color overlay, very simple. Just any color that you want. That's how you'll change that. This right here, background slashes. So you see these very subtle slashes. You can turn it off if you don't like it. I like it. Little tip, what I would do is, let me zoom in here. Let's try to keep this very close to your background color. And what I mean is that you don't want a lot of contrast. For example, you wouldn't want to come up here and do white. That's mayhem. You don't want to get too dark because I think that's still too distracting. What I like to do is kind of click in a dark area here, get close to the color, and then either go with something slightly lighter, very slightly lighter, or more than likely just slightly darker. I kind of like the way that looks. Just slightly darker than the color. So you still get that extra effect, but it's very subtle and it's not distracting from the text layers, and that's what you want the focus to be on. So let's back out of that. That brings us to the name. This one's just a solid color, so double click in the T and you can come up here, change it to whatever color. I use my character panel, so it's right there. Very simple. Same thing with the first name. And same thing with the position or jersey number up here. Now, coming back to the name, you might, this is set up with only so much room, so you might have to scale the text size down. If you have a longer name, you got to make it fit. Might have to move things around a little bit. But coming up here to the circle, I've got the fill turned all the way down so it's transparent. So you can play with the fill and get a little darker if you want it to be, but it's set to 0 by default. But the stroke, the outline, that is something you might want to change the color to. So if you just click right here on stroke, click in this box, set the color to anything that you like. You can change this to any position abbreviation, or if it says senior, you could put 21 in there. If that's the year they're graduating, you could put their jersey number, whatever works for you. To simplify things or make it easier, I went ahead and set these up with the little swoosh for each class. And obviously you can change it to something other than class, whatever you need it to, but this way you can just turn on the one that you need. Now you may need to come in and change the colors. This is same traditional way. Down here it's a color overlay on the swoosh, but you can customize the colors and just turn these on and off for depending on what what class your subject is. And then we have this, just creates that shadow right there, and I had to do it this way so that the shadow would be on top of the text layer. So if your name starts to creep over here close to the edge, I want it to look like the shadow is over the text. So not anything you need to mess with there. And that is all of the folders and layers in the 16 by 24 vertical. Hopefully I've covered everything. One other thing I do need to cover is our memory mate. And everything else is pretty much set up exactly the same, so we don't need to go over everything, but we do need to talk about how to get your team image in here. And so this is obviously for those who don't already know or haven't already done it, and there's probably multiple ways to do it. But the way that I do it and the way that I will share with you is to start with your 16 by 20 horizontal team image. Once you have this created and you've saved it, we'll want to make another version of this to be used for your memory mate. Now, because the memory mate already has all the text layers in it, we don't need these lower text layers here. So we want to turn those off. We probably also want to turn these stripes off. And we want to leave it with just our subject image and our background. Now, my personal opinion is that this is too much negative space down here at the bottom. And so what I would recommend that you do is select the subject images, use your move tool, click on the corner, and scale it up so that you get those elbows, or get them pretty close to the edge without being too close. I'm going to drag it down and just take up a little more space. Okay, so you can commit it. Once you have it how you like it, you'll want to save it. Save it somewhere. Oh, I don't want to overwrite that. What are you doing? File, save as, rather than. So you can save it somewhere, and that way, once you do, you can come in here, and you have this folder in your memory mate. It says drop team image in this folder. That way, you get the drop shadow and you get the stroke around it, and you can change the stroke color, and you can play with the drop shadow. But if you notice, I have my sample team image in here. And so all I did was drop that image in. In fact, we can go ahead and do it. I have one saved to the desktop. So I have it. We'll drop it right in there. We'll want to commit it. Click on the corner. And all you got to do is scale it however big you want. Excuse me. And place it wherever you want. It's a little too big still. But how big it is and exactly where you position it is entirely up to you. Just place it wherever you think it looks good, somewhere right in there. And then that's it. Then you can go in and drop your your subject images in and customize everything else and save your memory mates. And that is how the memory mate is done. And that is all that I have to cover in this video. So I certainly hope that it will answer any questions or help you with anything that you run into. But as always, if you still have questions or need help, feel free to reach out. You can email me at don@thirdcreative.com. You can hop on Facebook and shoot me a personal message. Try to get to those. Try to get to them as quick as I can. But as always, I want to thank all of you for your continued support. And I hope this template serves you well. And as always, I hope it makes you lots of cash. And that really is all I have. So until next time, see ya.